Okay, so here's the title of my talk, The MESA Project, a collaboration in teaching soft skills to employment seekers and pragmatics data analysis to graduates. And I would like to begin by talking about each of the terms and concepts in this title. So to begin with, it is the MESA project. MESA refers to the settlement organization at which with which I did a collaboration. Settlement organization, I'll talk to you about in depth in a few slides, but it's an organization in the Greater Toronto Area, and this is a pseudonym for it. And the collaboration, oh no, wait, I'm going to be spending some slides talking about the collaboration, the teaching of soft skills and pragmatics. So the other terms in the title that I'll address right now are employment seekers and graduate students. Employment seekers are people, in this case, in the Greater Toronto Area, who are looking for jobs. And I will be talking about immigrants who are in the process of acquiring English as an additional language, or who have already acquired English as an additional language and have found or are looking for employment in the GTA. Graduate students, I am referring to people like you who are students at Boise, although graduate students in this project were all MEd students, and I believe that you are mostly MA and PhD students, but in our program, in Language and Literacies Education.
Oh, sorry. It's my fault. What's happened? Okay. I was, sorry, can you not stop using the chat for saying hello? Because we said before that we want to use the chat for people who want to ask questions to Julie. Otherwise, I'm always interrupting my screen to check the chat list, and I'm kind of disturbing Julie in her talk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So could you please go to the next slide? This is number 4, right? All right, so I'm going to talk with you about what pragmatics is, what interlanguage pragmatics is, and what the collaboration was. The collaboration involved 3 parties: Mesa Center, which included both staff and teachers and students at Mesa Center. So the students were ESL students. And other collaborators were the graduate students who took a class with me. And the class was a class on workplace communication and second language learning and communication in the workplace. And the third participant in the collaboration was me, the instructor. I'll be drawing on literature and examples from the literature on soft skills in vocational language instruction. So in just a moment, I'll be talking about what soft skills is too. That's kind of the plan for the first half of this talk. Enrica, could you please go to the next slide? Number 5, great. So
just one thing, can all mute the mic so that we don't have extra. I could do myself, but then I would have to unshare the screen.
Okay. So what is pragmatics? Pragmatics is the study of how we say what we mean and how we mean what we say. So to take an example, if I say to you, it's 5:10, what might I mean? I could say that simple utterance to mean you're late, or let's go, or why are you bothering me, or please leave, or we're late, or the time is 5:10. And I bet you could think of other possible meanings of such a simple utterance as it's 5:10. Slide 6, please.
Yeah.
So the meaning depends in great part on the context, and the context includes where we are and who we are and who we're talking to. So If I said it's 5:10 while waiting for the bus and it's minus 23 degrees Celsius outside, I might mean something like, wow, the bus is really late. I can't believe we have to wait out here in the cold. If I say it's 5:10 in a lecture room, I might mean, oh, I think it's time for class to start. If I say it's 5:10 in a restaurant, I might mean, well, I would expect the service to be pretty fast this early. There isn't a crowd yet here for dinner. And those are just some examples. What I mean also depends on who I'm talking with. So if I'm talking to a student or a colleague or my child or my parent or my employer or an employee or a guest, all of those different relationships would play a part in determining what that simple utterance means. Slide 7, please.
I was muting somebody who was
So the additional elements that influence what we mean, how we say what we mean, and what we mean when we say it, have to do with the relationship between a speaker and the speaker's recipient of what someone is saying. Or we call those people interlocutors, people who interact with one another verbally. Some of the factors that we have to consider are distance, like how well the two people know each other. Are they strangers? Are they acquaintances? Are they very good friends or intimates? Another factor that plays into how we interpret what we mean and how we choose to say what we mean is the relative status of interlocutors. So are we equals, or does one person have a higher status than the other? For example, is one person a generation older than the other? Or is one person the boss and the other person the employee? Or is one person, does one person have some kind of official position which is higher than another person's position? Finally, we look at what's actually being said and whether it imposes on the other person. As an example, if I request that you open the door for me because I have a heavy load in my arms, that might require a certain amount of politeness strategies. But if I request that you lend me $1,000, I might use some different strategies because I would perceive asking you to lend me $1,000 as being higher in position and asking you to open the door for me. So all of those play into the choices that we make and how we interpret each other in what we say. Slide 8.
Yeah, I went there.
Okay. So the situation in which we find ourselves and the choices that we make are influenced by the setting, the purpose for which we are interacting, as well as cultural norms and expectations. To give you examples in emails, I can imagine that most of you have sometimes spent some time trying to figure out, okay, Enrica, oh, I see the problem.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm sorry for the interruption, but about 5 minutes before I got online with you, my computer crashed and I lost the last, it lost my most recent version of the slides. So I see that this one is incorrect. So forgive me. I had put your name, Enrica.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah,
supposed
it's
to
okay.
be, okay.
It's okay, don't worry. Yeah.
So this is an older version. I hope not everything was lost. Anyway, so if I were, I'm sure that many of you have spent some time trying to figure out how to address someone or how to word or phrase an email when you are writing an email to someone with whom you feel the stakes are high, there's a status differential, you're asking for something which is hard to ask for, and even the simple greeting, it can be difficult. And just as a test, let's ask Professor Picardo how you feel if you receive an email that says, "Hi, Prof," versus, "Hey, Enrica," versus, "Dear Professor Picardo."
Do you want me to answer?
Yes, please.
Um, Well, it depends. I immediately perceive the difference, the distance that this person wants to put between me and them. So being more, showing more, being more close, or showing this kind of distance if they use dear professor, so and so.
Do you ever get one? Do you ever get an email which you feel is somehow inappropriate because of the way they addressed you?
Yeah, I don't like when people address, and I know that I shouldn't be feeling that way because it's normal, but when they address with your name, you know, like Enrica, uh, comma, new line,
Yeah,
that
with no
sounds very,
hi.
still sounds very strange to me, much more than hey, Enrica, or
Right.
hi, prof. That's fine.
Uh,
The lack of any hi, dear, whatever sounds strange to me.
and that can, thank you, Enrique. So that can really color how you perceive and respond to the whole rest of the email. So even such simple things as greetings are important and say something about who you are and what you mean to convey. So let's move on to the next slide, please, number 9. So to summarize, pragmatics is how we make meaning um, beyond using particular words, beyond vocabulary and syntax, but it's the nuances of what is said, by whom, to whom, and for what purpose, and how those nuances are very much influenced by small things like hedges and little politeness strategies. So another definition of pragmatics is by Locastro, 2005, the study of speaker and hearer meaning created in their joint actions that include both linguistic and non-linguistic signals. Joint actions is the most important part of this to me because, again, what I say and the meaning it has will be different depending on who I say it to and how it is received. Let's move on to slide
Yeah.
10. So pragmatic competence is one's ability to do all those things of pragmatics in an effective and appropriate way. How people use language in such a way as to achieve what they want, the ability to convey a message successfully and for its meaning, whether direct or indirect, blatant or subtle, to be interpreted by the hearers as intended by the speakers. Or, and that's my definition. Another definition by Lou, Derwing, and Abbott is pragmatic competence is knowing what is culturally and contextually appropriate to say in a given situation. Now, slide 11. Interlanguage pragmatics is all of that as it is acquired by learners of additional languages. If you've taken a second language acquisition class, you're familiar with the concept of interlanguage, which refers to both the systematicity of language acquisition.
আবলা আমাকে একটা ইয়ে দিবা
Oh my goodness. Sorry, mute your mic. Wait, I can't control. I mean, I can, but I have to go down to each of them. Wait
It's
a
okay.
sec. I see that everybody's muted. Where does it go?
Okay.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. It's at least it helps me to know that there are people here because I feel like I'm talking to Enrica and a blank wall.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, so interlanguage refers to both the systematicity of the rules of a language that are acquired and the dynamism. So as one acquires a language, the inner system continues to change and come closer to what the goal is to be able to have full proficiency in a language. Interlanguage pragmatics is the pragmatic competence of learners of a second or additional language. And it has to do with the study of teaching, learning, acquiring, and using additional languages. Some of the biggest sources of difficulty in acquiring pragmatic competence in additional languages is understanding politeness strategies, how to be direct or indirect, how to communicate appropriately, and how to navigate cross-cultural differences in communicative styles. Okay, slide 12.
Yeah.
So pragmatics in language classes, for a long time, language teachers just tried to teach grammar and vocabulary and pronunciation. And it was more recent that attention was brought to the notion of also teaching pragmatics, how to communicate appropriately. And these days, that's given quite a lot of attention, but it's not that easy to teach. And so often instructors of additional languages will focus on particular aspects of pragmatics which are easier to identify, such as modifications and softeners. So instead of saying, lend me $1,000, I might say, I was wondering if you might happen to have some extra money in the bank, and I would promise to pay it back to you within the next 2 weeks. I'm just waiting for my paycheck. So all things like that are modifications and softeners that might be used, and they can be taught formulaically in language classrooms. In addition, some of the areas of pragmatics that we talk about in language classrooms include learning to recognize cultural differences. If a language learner is aware of cultural differences, they can make an informed choice as to how much they want to conform or not conform to some of the cultural norms. Of course, the problem there is that it's very hard to generalize, and it's also dangerous if we overgeneralize about what particular cultural norms are, because there's, of course, a lot of variation within each language group or cultural group. Learning how to build rapport and to find common ground are also increasingly recognized as important parts of having pragmatic skills. So it has been shown through research that establishing some kind of common ground, such as I'm talking with you, and it turns out that you and I both have a child, and we kind of bond on upon learning that we each have a child, or talking with someone, even talking with someone about the weather. The reason that the weather is such a common topic for small talk in the elevator in North American elevators, is that it's something we can all relate to. It's a way of establishing some common ground and helps us to build rapport with one another. So finally, that brings us to slide 13, where I want to talk about soft skills, which is a term which is virtually absent in academic literature, but is ubiquitous in the North American business community. And particularly in terms of employment and employment training resources, soft skills is referred to a lot. And it's pretty similar, if not the same, as the way we describe pragmatics. Soft skills are identified on many websites as critically important for employment success. And mastering soft skills can serve as a way to bridge the perceived incongruity of an internationally educated professional's expertise with that professional's lack of familiarity with the Canadian workplace culture. So soft skills actually become a high stakes issue for internationally educated professionals seeking work in Canada. And notice that now I've moved on to talk about internationally educated professionals, because that's the area in which I do my research, and the population about whom we'll be talking when I describe this research project with Mesa Center. So employers have defined soft skills as the ability to adapt and problem solve, collaborate, resolve conflict, empathize, persuade, negotiate, and generally people skills or interpersonal skills. Slide 14, please.
Yeah.
So now I'll tell you about the center, Mesa Center, which is an immigrant settlement organization in the Greater Toronto Area. They have a whole lot of different services there for immigrants, including helping them with finding jobs and finding places to live and finding winter clothing for those who've come from a warm part of the world, finding community centers, churches, mosques, a lot of different services. But the ones that I'm going to be focusing on today are their language training programs. They have LINK classes, language instruction for newcomers to Canada, and they also offer something called enhanced language training, which is language instruction for internationally educated professionals who already have a decent level of proficiency in English, but who want to improve their sector-specific language skills for workplaces. And the enhanced language training courses that are offered at Mesa Center address specifically professions in healthcare, information technology, office administration, and finance and accounting. So they've got 4 different branches of their ELT program. So a few years ago, the manager, can you, are we okay? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so a few years ago, the manager of Mesa Center's English language programs approached me. I call her Laura, that's her pseudonym, and she said that one of the goals of Mesa Center was to improve its instruction of soft skills. She and her colleagues had determined that soft skills were a critically important were a critically important part of education, of a language education for the immigrants who were seeking employment through their organization. And she said, we don't really know how to better teach soft skills than what we're doing now. Can you help us, since your area of expertise is pragmatics? So I said, this sounds like a great opportunity for us to do a collaboration, particularly because Laura said, maybe some of your students would be interested in doing some research here. And I said, well, I know that some of my students would love to have opportunities to do some research, particularly my international students who are not, who can't get work permits to teach languages in Toronto, but really want to have some hands-on experience in language classes, as well as hands-on experience with doing some applied linguistics research. So I reviewed their curriculum and the programs that Mesa Centers offers for ESL students. And Laura consulted with employers of graduates of Mesa's programs, and she and I put our heads together and developed a plan for how we could collaborate to investigate how soft skills are currently being addressed and possibly make some recommendations for addressing them more effectively in the future. Could you please go to slide 15?
Slide 15, yeah.
Okay. So I was just creating a new course at OISE, which I called Communication as Second Language Learning in the Workplace. And the students in that class, in the first time that I taught it, became the collaborators for this program. So let me see. First, I'd like to tell you just a little bit more about international students at OISE. They comprise, usually, they comprise over 50% of the full-time MEd students in language and literacies education. And while the majority of the domestic students in LLE do have experience teaching and opportunities to continue teaching or gain other practical experience related to language education kind of on the side while they're doing their studies at OISE, the international students for the most part do not, because they don't have work permits. So I wanted to offer them the experience of collecting and analyzing authentic empirical data, as well as opportunities to observe ESL instruction in a Canadian context. And so I created, for this course, I created a number of possible term projects they could choose from. And one of the projects was, oh, let's see. I think I'm going to need to ask you to go to the next slide,
Right.
Enrique.
Yeah.
And so one of the projects was to carry out an empirical study at Mesa Center in accordance with the guidelines that I provided. So I applied to the Ethics Review Board for ethics approval to do this project. I did a template so that right off this, the beginning of the semester, the students didn't need to apply for ethics approval, but the project had already been approved and they could start designing within certain constraints, according to the ethics approval that we had received. They could start designing their questionnaires and or other strategies for collecting data from Mesa Center. So this became a partnership between Mesa and OISE, and it was a kind of service learning and empirical research for the graduate students, while what Mesa got out of it was some curriculum development and some feedback about what was going on in their classes in terms of addressing soft skills. So before we got started with that, I should say that Laura and I did a joint needs analysis and consulted with each other a number of times over several months, in which we discussed what the needs are of my graduate students who could learn from this collaboration and what the needs were of her teachers and of the management at Mesa Center. So in the end, I had 22 students in my 22 graduate students in my course, and 15 of them chose the Mesa Center option for their term projects. All 15 of them were MEd students. So let's go on to slide 17.
17, yeah.
Okay, I think I've already talked about this. So let's go on to 18. So together with Laura, we came up with research teams of 2 and 3 students each. Those were my students, and they were matched according to their educational backgrounds and research interests. Then each of my research teams was matched with a class or a group of teachers or managers at Mesa Center, and we made these matches again according to the levels of experience and language backgrounds of my students, because some of my students were still in the process of acquiring English as an additional language, and they were assigned to the lower level link classes to observe them, and other of my students were not only highly proficient English speakers, but were also very experienced educators. A few had worked for many years at settlement organizations. So they were matched up with some of the managers and staffers who were interested in doing a focus group and discussing how to change their curriculum. So we were directed by our general question of collaborative inquiry. What are the roles, perceptions, and implications of soft skills instruction in Mesa Center's LINC and ELT courses, and how can they be improved? Slide 19, please. So I want to tell you, I'm going to just highlight some of the work that my students created. As I said, they worked in teams and they came up with the research questions that they wanted to ask, and here are a few of them. How are the workplace communication skills taught in language training courses for new immigrants? How are soft skills taught to basic level LINC students? How is the ELT Office Administration course preparing its learners for customer service in the Canadian workplace? What are the gaps between learner and instructor needs and expectations of the program? So as you can see, the first and fourth questions are much broader than the other two. The second question is addressed specifically for basic level LINC classes. And the third question is specifically about one of the ELT courses, the one for office administration, and specific about customer service. Slide 20.
20. Yeah.
The research, so each of all of the student teams, the graduate student teams, then designed, came up with a plan for how they were going to collect data, what kind of data they needed to be able to answer their questions. And they came up with combinations of classroom observations, instructor interviews, student interviews, focus groups with staff and administrators, and curriculum and materials evaluation. Slide 21, please.
Yeah.
So I'm going to summarize some of the learning outcomes of my students, as well as the people at Mesa. And after that, I'm going to, instead of analyzing my students' research developments in depth, I'm going to refer to some of the themes that are discussed in the general literature on workplace communication and soft skills, and then refer to examples from the data that my students collected to demonstrate how those themes played out in this empirical setting. Also, before I say that, just a word about the outcomes of this collaboration. In addition to doing the data collection, the students in my class learned to critique literature, to identify suitability of different kinds of data collection instruments and tools. They learned, in terms of other research methods, they learned about the importance of using pseudonyms and ensuring confidentiality to the participants. They all transcribed data and learned about sociolinguistic data analysis, as well as collaborative research teams. They learned to triangulate findings when they got some information from an instructor and the instructor's students told them something different. And they also learned what happens when things don't work out so well. So since all of them were working in teams and they had to write up their findings for their term project, there were a couple of so-called train wrecks in which the team members couldn't get along in the end and had to end up writing separate papers. So now in terms of what they learned, well, I think I covered. So they learned to understand issues around workplace communication, because while they were doing this research, we were also reading literature on different topics in workplace communication and second language communication and learning. The Mesa manager received from our class a report which included all of the papers written by my graduate students and a summary report by me. Then I met with the manager, with Laura, and interpreted the findings with her. And later I was asked to provide feedback to the staff. That resulted in Laura's developing a new online curriculum for teaching soft skills and continued hands-on opportunities for my future MEd students to do research there. Slide 22, please.
22, yeah.
Okay, so this is only the middle of my talk, but it's time for me to express thanks to the students in my class, as well as the staff of Mesa Center, who made this research possible. And then on slide 23, I also worked with Jean Sinclair, who was a graduate assistant at the time. She's now a professor in Texas, but she's my co-author on a manuscript which is under review on this research project. Slide 24, please.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you look at literature on research on ESL in the workplace, there is a deficit orientation for the most part. People like Professor Picardo, who are advocates of plurilingualism, will understand that this does not have to be the case. There are many other ways to frame what immigrants and everyone really, what diverse backgrounds of employees can bring and do to enhance workplace settings. However, unfortunately, the majority of research still views the deficits more than the assets that diverse workforces bring. So Canadian vocational ESL programs are deficit oriented and assimilationist. There are exceptions, but in general, they're still trying to help learners of English as a second language to fit in a perceived monolingual or monocultural workplace. Even though we in the Greater Toronto area know that that's really not often the case that it's a monolingual and monocultural workplace. Um, so I'll quote from Hawk's 2014 publication, employers don't want to experience the sense of foreignness. They encourage immigrants to mold themselves into desirable workers for Canadian employers. Now, Mesa Center, to its credit, has been proactive about changing and I would say improving this mindset to encourage employers as well as employees to perceive the assets that diverse linguistic and cultural backgrounds can bring to a workplace. Now, what I'd like to do is share some of the themes that have been highlighted in the literature, and then use examples from the data that my students collected to show whether those claims can be supported or refuted. So let's move to slide 25.
Fine. It's there, yeah.
Okay, so just thinking about time here. Enrica, do I have
We're
to?
doing fine, yeah. I
So
think we're doing fine. No?
did I stop around 6 o'clock?
Oh, a little bit later, I think you need to know to get through. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to, because I can skip some if I need to. Okay, so, all right. So the first theme is what exactly are soft skills? And while the literature says that language teachers have a hard time coming to a consensus, and vocational ESL textbooks usually do not refer to empirical findings to teach pragmatics. Sometimes they're overly simplistic or prescriptive when talking about pragmatics, such as focusing on how to shake hands or how to brush teeth before an interview and how to abstain from littering. Let's go on to slide 26.
Yeah.
Now we'll look at what we found in the data from Mesa Center. And similarly, there was difficulty defining soft skills. This was something which was asked of many of the teachers, and they all had different definitions, even though they thought it was important to address soft skills. One person said, soft skills is what is okay to ask in certain situations, body language, eye contact, what is considered to be polite in Canada, showing initiative. Now that can be broken down to a very, very basic level. And yet, please, 27.
7, yeah.
And yet, in a kind of contradictory way, then someone said, but you can't just say that from 1 to 5, these are the soft skills. The more you go into it, the more personality traits you will come across. Be positive. Now you know you're new, you're nervous in the country, be positive. So this person is now saying that personality traits also play into what is considered to be a soft skills. Slide 28, please.
28, yeah.
There, one of the link courses, which was called Work and Life, one of the activities in that class was to critique an image of a prospective employee. So the teacher was describing this picture to the students and said, so there are more things that are wrong here. So what is important is posture. When you sit, you need to sit straight, okay? When you stand, you should be like this, like that. So how you hold your body when you stand or sit, then clean your fingernails, cut your hair, clean your beard or mustache. Okay, there's one name for all these things. Do you know maybe? They say grooming. Posture is how we hold our body when you stand or sit, how you cut your hair or fix your nails. And please continue to
Oh, yeah, okay.
9. So this is the instructor's lesson, okay? They're looking at a picture of someone who the instructor perceives to be not well groomed, and this person is applying for a job. And so the instructor says, okay, look at this guy here. Can you see what's wrong? Can you see his hair is too long? And the student says, too long hair, yeah. Instructor, and shoes, what about shoes here? He's wearing sports shoes. Sports shoes, is it okay? Students, no. Instructor, okay, no. So you need more classic, elegant. A student says, gorgeous. And the instructor says, no, gorgeous, normal. So that is an example of teaching a particular prescribed way to behave in the workplace and associating it with normal. Now, if you go to move to slide 30,
Yeah.
what Jean and I would like to propose is that there are some alternative approaches which could include building critical awareness so that students could dialogue about the importance of context, and soft skills can be taught through observation and critique of authentic speech acts such as job interviews by watching and discussing videos with discussion. So in such a way, people would be able to make their own decisions about whether they want to do what is perceived as normal and what the possible ramifications or consequences might be. Care must be taken to combine simplified language necessary in low-level link classes with a sensitivity to oversimplifying complex characterizations of people and their workplace behaviors. Slide 31, please.
Yeah.
The other theme I'd like to discuss today is the notion of a Canadian identity. This is something discussed in the literature. Girard and Bauer, 2007, argue that Canadian job-seeking immigrants are regulated by an institutional cultural capital that prioritizes certain qualities over others. Personality traits such as easygoing, motivated, and open-minded differ greatly in their interpretation across cultures. Within some cultures, these qualities may not even be prized. So let's look at the data on slide 32.
32. Yeah.
Okay, here's another activity from a different link class in which the instructor gave the students a sheet of paper and said, and the sheet of paper had words and definitions. And the instructor said, you're going to match words with definitions. You can read the definition aloud, and the student who has the word that matches with the definition can say the word, can call out the word, okay? Students say, listen to others. Instructor says, oh, okay, listens to others. And class, open-minded? Instructor, open-minded, yes. Slide 33. Student, instructor, responsible. Okay, responsible. And students say, don't take long breaks. Instructor, don't take, again? Student, don't take long breaks, work overtime. Instructor, don't take long breaks and work overtime. Class, hard worker, hard worker. Instructor, hard worker, good. Student, winking and smiling at everyone. Instructor, winking and smiling at everyone, winking and smiling at everyone. Class, friendly. Instructor, friendly, friendly. So,
I already went to the other one.
Okay, so in other words, you know, making these very one-to-one correspondence between being responsible means not taking long breaks, and being friendly is winking and smiling means being friendly. And we know very well that things are more complicated than that. Let me give you here, sorry?
Shall I move on? Not yet.
I'd like to move to slide 34, please.
Yeah.
So what one of the instructors said about this notion of being Canadian or creating a Canadian persona. She said, an internationally trained engineer who spoke English very well came from a different culture, and it was very difficult to understand him and also to get his nonverbal communication skills anywhere close to a Canadian-ish. Then I told him that he really needs to think of himself as who he is, but who he is in Canada. So not a different person, but the Canadian version of himself. And he started working on it, and we got to incredible results just after a few classes because he realized that it goes deep down to identity, that he really has to somehow figure out a Canadian identity for himself. So this was something that this teacher described as her most successful moment in mentoring internationally trained professionals. And from a critical lens, we have to consider how much that person is being asked to change her or himself to fit into one particular version of a Canadian workplace. Now let's move to slide 35. So similarly, a teacher gave as an assignment that students should create a Canadian persona for themselves. a student was to search for a celebrity to emulate so that he, quote, could build a Canadian identity based on that kind of a role model. Thus, it was their homework to figure out who they were in this new culture. So it wasn't, and then she said, so it wasn't me prescribing anything. It was a bit of a journey, and it was interesting. The results were good. So this goes along with the previous slide about trying to identify who they are in this new setting, as though they're kind of becoming a new person. Now, while we recognize how useful that can be, we also want to consider some possible other ways of approaching this. If you could go to slide 36, please. We would, I guess the final thoughts that we'd like to, I say we because Jean and I wrote the paper, but that I would like you to consider are, if Canada encourages skilled people to migrate here, how can we teach soft skills and organizational fit without a deficiency orientation? What is the impact on students' identity? Do they have to have a mindset such as the one that was described in the previous slide of needing to change themselves to fit into Canada, or are there other options? Some other options that we would like to consider are culturally responsive pedagogy, opportunities to explore their options and to make informed decisions on the basis of what they observe, to critically consider how to present Canadian culture to newcomers rather than simply saying this is the way it is, and to encourage members of the majority culture to accept shared responsibility for cultural and linguistic adaptation instead of putting the onus on the language learners. Slide 37. Thank you very much. And I'm very ready for your comments and questions.
So thank you very much, Julie. I stopped the sharing my screen so you can see Julie, and maybe if you want to put on your cameras. So